major wars all look different than the previous war because war evolves over time. So what ends up happening is the lay people start to believe that the next war is going to look like an amplification of the last war instead of like something totally different. So when you think about World War II versus World War I, completely different styles of conflict, different weaponry, different tactics, different strategies. When you think about what happened with the rise of terrorism, it was completely different than the Cold War. So why would people think that World War III would look like an exacerbation of World War II with more nuclear weapons and more bombers and more invasions? It was never going to look that way. It was going to evolve. The ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, just last year released an official statement commenting on how unprecedented it is that multiple American adversaries have allied with each other with nothing else in common except for their adversarial relationship with the United States. That's what brings North Korea and Russia and Iran and China all together. And now, because of their adversarial relationship,
well, that and sanctions, Andrew. I mean, shit, we kind of forced them together when we sanctioned all of them. When we tell like a bunch of major economies in the world that you can no longer get access to the rest of the world, then they start doing business with each other.
And the sanctions have existed since 2001, the late 90s. We started sanctioning these countries. But I don't disagree with you. They woke up as they turned more authoritarian. Their authoritarian leaders woke up to the fact that, hey, if we can't do business with the West, we can do business with everyone else. And the West never woke up to the fact that when everyone else does business together, they actually create a larger base of money circulation than when you just play nicely with your peers. The 1950s era model of how the United States dominated Europe economically and then forced Europe to take loans from the United States and made them dependent on American military technology, that strategy was very effective for about 40 years. But now it's much less effective, and we haven't changed our overarching strategy for how we prosecute American power and American will over the rest of the world. And don't get me wrong, American primacy is absolutely what I believe the world needs. There is no better leader out there than the United States. That doesn't mean the United States is perfect, but we're a hell of a lot better than the alternatives that are out there. But we're losing our own ability to do what we need to do because we keep subscribing to policies of the past.
Well, sure. In the early 2000s, it was a unipolar world. I don't think that right now, as we have an honest discussion in 2025, that we would say it is a unipolar world. It is I would say it's a bipolar world. And you did a good job of describing who's on what end of that. But I would cast it differently. I would say we have a number of conflicts going on now that are largely driven by people's normative, zero-sum nationalistic behavior, right? Russia made the decision to invade Ukraine because they felt encircled. Now, people will debate forever the propriety of the decisions that led them to be encircled. Certainly, you can't argue that it was effective deterrence. It used to be we have to encircle Russia for effective deterrence. Well, that didn't work. It didn't deter. So maybe it invited the attack. I don't know. And then you look at what China is definitely going to do in Taiwan, which is take it. And by the way, we're going to let them because we would be playing an away game there and we would lose it over the skies of Taiwan. And so, that is going to resolve, I think, in that way, but not as part of some like larger global struggle, but just because that's a nationalistic tendency and they view it as normative and zero sum. And so like the notion that there's some new world order of Xi and Kim Jong-un and Putin and the Ayatollah sitting around like together, it sometimes feels like threat construction to me. It sometimes feels like, why we've got to go give like another $1 trillion to the Pentagon. But you think that's what's happening?
No. I've never said that. Again, we are projecting World War III is going to look like World War II. World War II was Axis versus Allies. I've never once suggested that World War III is going to be like that at all. World War III just means that the world is in conflict.
So who do we fight in World War III?
Yeah, so again, I don't think we're fighting any one adversary. I think we have multiple adversaries that we're fighting, and our adversaries realize that they can execute multiple of their own objectives by cooperating with each other and maintaining a conflict with the West. And they're all degrading the level of threat that the West poses back to them by by aggravating us simultaneously with other people in that adversarial group. We are less
Right,
capable.
which we don't have. That becomes asymmetric because we don't have Blackwater to go and fight the Houthis in Yemen to preserve global shipping. We don't operate through proxies, allegedly, though one could argue in Ukraine we're kind of operating through a proxy. But where you have Wagner Group, or where the Chinese are able to send the little green men into Taiwan if they need to, what you're saying is other nations have as one of their assets plausible deniability, which we've deprived ourselves.
I mean, more or less, what I'm saying is that when it's not that different from the grade school recess field, right? The backyard in elementary school. When you're the big bully and everybody kowtows to you, it's good to be the bully. But once 3 or 4 of the other kids all get together and they pick up sticks and rocks and they start throwing rocks and hitting the bully with sticks, all of a sudden the bully is much less capable to take on all 4 of the other kids at one time. And that's what the world is realizing. The world is realizing that China can harass Taiwan by selling oil to the Russians and by continuing the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa. And Iran is realizing that they can prosecute missiles into Israel and they can continue to sponsor terrorism around the world if they export their agricultural goods to China and to North Korea. So you've got all of these different mixes of benefits and objective priorities that our adversaries get to prosecute simultaneously with each other without having any kind of formal alliance or allegiance to cooperate with one another, which is what existed during World War II.
I think you've largely achieved my objective in giving people a sense of how, on these questions that are driving how the country moves geopolitically, how someone from an operator and a policymaker would approach them. But I cannot resist the urge to ask you just a few tradecraft questions because everybody's going to want to know the answer. So as a lawyer who took a lot of depositions and examined a lot of witnesses, I developed what I called the human lie detector, where there are certain things with people's eyes, their body movements, how they shift, where you can have a very, very good sense of certainty as if someone's lying to you. Do you have like a few quick suggestions on that for people watching?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's tricky to try to assign simple behaviors, like simple movements, to multiple people, and I'm sure you saw that as an attorney too. It takes time to develop a baseline on each individual before you can develop their tells and their ticks. But one of the best ones out there is to look for chronology when you ask them a chronological based question. If you ask somebody a question that takes place in the past, you need to look to expect that their eyes will look up and to the left, because that is, in English language, that's how we read. We read from left to right. So when somebody is referencing, and they are an English speaker, if they're referencing their chronological history mentally, they should treat with their eyes, they should treat it like they're reading a story. They'll look back in time to come up with the idea. If they look up and to the right, then they're tapping into their creative side of their brain. They're not looking at their chronology. Instead, they're thinking of what can I say right now instead of what happened in the past.
Sometimes we got security briefings in Congress as to how to be less noticed so as to create less of a threat. And they taught us about the gray man theory, which is how you dress. You don't want to have things that get you noticed. If someone is trying to evade, you kind of go with the gray man theory. What's your best advice?
The gray man theory is very, very real, because human beings are designed to look for things that they find threatening and things that they find attractive. So if you want to be a gray man, you need to make sure that you appear in no way like a threat, but also in no way like you're attractive. And that's what makes it so easy, because most people are trying to attract attention. So let all of those people try to attract attention, and you do everything you can to resist. Long sleeve pants, long sleeve shirts, drab colors, moderate grooming. These are ways that you can absolutely disappear and be forgotten, and people will never even know you were there.
This is why I didn't go into the CIA. I could not have possibly made myself not attractive. I want one last tradecraft question. If you're trying to extract information from someone in a conversation, what are some tricks to get to the information you want rather than getting the runaround?
Yeah, this it's such a great question. One of the first things that we're taught at CIA is a method called RICE. And RICE is an acronym that helps you identify what motivates someone to talk. And the acronym stands for reward, ideology, coercion, or ego, RICE. Everybody is motivated by all 4 of those, but to different extents. So if you want to motivate someone to share a secret, or if you want to motivate someone to talk outside of school or share sensitive information, all you have to do is find out which of those 4 things motivates them the strongest and then lean into that. If they're particularly religious, lean into the ideology of their religion. If they're reward-based, offer them a free cup of coffee or a new meal. How many people have given their parents' address over because they thought there might be a free cruise on the other side? You know what I'm saying? So people will give sensitive information all the time if you can align the question you're asking with one of those 4 core motivations.
Andrew Bustamante, you are a bright guy, a brave patriot, and a hell of a good hang on a podcast. I've enjoyed it. Do you have, before I let you go, do you have a question for me that I can answer?
So I want to know, Matt, now that you're seeing a change in administration and aggressive transformation in government, what do you see as the probability of us seeing real change in the next, say, 2 to 4 years?
Far higher than even on election day. And I was pretty hopeful for election day. But Trump has rolled in here with a sense that he's only got 4 years. He's not running for re-election, and he wants to make the changes to save the country. And I think he wants to go out as a transformational president for the positive. That's why you've seen the unleashing of Elon Musk. That's why you've seen the barrage of policy changes. And as someone now who's a commentator and a news host, just keeping up with it is exhausting because so much is happening every day to change stuff. And at the end of the day, the durability of that is going to be dependent on whether or not the Trump generation ushers in a generation into some of those middle manager positions that started out our discussion. And do those people get credentialed and experienced so that when future administrations on the right of our political spectrum are evaluating the credentialed talent, did it rise through an America First thinking of the world, or did it rise through some of the antiquated dogmas that I think we've critiqued and dispensed with?
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Matt, for having me. It was a fantastic time.